Good Friday afternoon, guys. Just wanted to take a couple seconds and run over some other points from Daniel chapter 2 to try and clear up some confusion, maybe a little explanation as to why we skipped over a few things, didn't talk about them in depth, but just wanted to go over some things, and then there are some other questions that were posed this week that have to do with the Bible in general, but not necessarily about Daniel himself. So we're just going to go ahead and take a look at a few of these real fast. But like I said, if you guys have any other questions, always feel free to throw something through to the church, send us an email, a text, a phone call. We like learning about this stuff just as much as you guys. So without any other introductions, let's go ahead, except that you can see my back here, my display llama. If you guys are seeing this response video, go ahead and hop online and reserve your own stuffed animals. They're good company. But let's jump into a few questions. So the first two questions we actually got, I'm actually not going to talk about right away, just because they have to do with Daniel, but they're questions about the dream. So let me pause on those real quick. Let me run to one of them that came across, which was, I kept saying Daniel was in school. So by that, what I meant is, if we look back in, Daniel chapter 1. Let me find for it. Yeah, so they were supposed to be trained for 3 years. And they were going to be learning the new language, learning the literature of the Chaldeans, and gleaning understanding so that these kids could serve the Chaldean Empire, the Babylonian Empire, and make things better for them, administrate better. They're in training, they're in school. This happened in the first year of Nebuchadnezzar. He goes up to Jerusalem, besieges Jerusalem. He carries away some of the choice young men, who we read in chapter 1 had no defect, and they were very smart, very quick to learn. And he puts them in this 3-year program. Then we read in chapter 2, the opening statement of chapter 2 says, one night during the 2nd year of his reign. So Nebuchadnezzar has only been reigning for 2 years. Daniel's schooling, indoctrination is going to last 3 years. So at this time, when Nebuchadnezzar calls up the wise men of Babylon, of the city proper, we see that he doesn't call Daniel and his friends because Daniel has yet to present himself before the king because his 3 years of schooling is not up. So when I kept saying that Daniel was in school, Daniel wasn't aware of this, it's because he was still in training. He was still underneath the officials of the palace guard, but he was still considered a wise man. He was being trained in the ways of the Babylonians, in the ways of the administrators, in the ways of things like that. So that's why he's still counted among the wise men whenever Arioch comes to kill all the wise men, but he wasn't brought before the king because when the king asked for his wise men, his conjurers, his sorcerers to tell him his dream and interpret it, he didn't call for the kids in school. He called for everyone else that was, filling their job. So that's why I kept mentioning that Daniel was still in school. He hadn't been known about the issue. No one thought about talking to a kid. So just for us, it's wise sometimes to listen to our kids or listen to young people. When they say something, don't dismiss it right away, because sometimes God's going to talk to them because they don't have years of clouded adulthood in it. I find myself that I'm clouded a lot. And when I freak out, my 7-year-old daughter says, hey, why don't you just pray about it? Point taken, God. The other question that we got was a little more geographical, which was, why does it go out of its way to say that Daniel is put over the province of Babylon? In verse 48 and 49, it says, then the king of chapter 2, then the king appointed Daniel to a high position and gave him valuable gifts. He made Daniel ruler over the whole province of Babylon and was as chief over all his wise men. And then at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be in charge of all the affairs of the province of Babylon while Daniel remained in the king's court. So Daniel is promoted to the king's court. So he is going to be privy to the international affairs of the king. But the province of Babylon, which is here, let me see this real quick. So here, so this is our province of Babylon. So this center section right here, this is really the powerhouse of what Nebuchadnezzar was ruling. This was the Babylonian city, the Babylonian area. He ruled from the south down here. You can see he ruled from Egypt up into Asia Minor a little bit, up into modern-day Turkey, and all the way down to the Persian Gulf. His mainstay were really the coast. You see this horseshoe shape because the Tigris and the Euphrates flow right here. You hit the coast of the Mediterranean, you come down south, and you have the Sinai and the western Arabian desert. Not very hospitable places. So his empire was really based on city-states that are near the rivers or near the coast. And he had given Daniel, or he appointed Daniel to his command, to his court. So this province of Babylon right here, the central hub, Washington, D.C., if you can think of it, still needed people to administrate it. So Daniel was appointed above all of people in the province of Babylon, but he remained at the king's court because he was going to be privy to the king's affairs internationally, whereas Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, were going to be in this province right here, seeing to the day-to-day goings-ons of the area. So think of it like Daniel would technically be in Washington, D.C., but he would be in the president's cabinet, whereas Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the mayor, the chief engineer, the chief health official, things like that. So that's what he means when he keeps talking about the province of Babylon, not the empire of Babylon. Then the other question that we had was, can you explain, can you go in more in depth what the stone, why is this stone motif in here? And to summarize, when we look at the dream, it says, let's see here, in verse 44, so during the reigns of those kings, so these are all the kings of the statue. The statue represents kingdoms that come and fall. It says, God in heaven will raise and set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. It will crush all these kingdoms into nothingness and will stand forever. That is the meaning of the rock cut out from the mountain, though not by human hands, that crushed to pieces the statue of iron, of bronze, of clay, of silver, and of gold. The great God was showing the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true and its meaning is certain. So the image of this rock is, with Daniel's interpretation, basically a personification of Christ's eventual return again, and that it is going to be a kingdom that is going to last forever. Daniel takes a lot of stock in the fact that God has everything planned out, and Daniel's just blessed to be a part of the plan, to be part of God's tools. Because Daniel knows, in the end, God's kingdom will be set up, God's chosen one will be put in power, and God will rule and reign in a tangible way for the rest of time. Daniel understands this, which is why he does not look too in depth at the dream. He knows what's going to happen. He's had it interpreted, but he doesn't list every kingdom that's ever going to come up and go down. He lists the major powers that are going to play in the world, and then this rock is hewn out, not by human hand. So it's a rock, it is a foundation, it is a kingdom, not of human creation, and it covers the whole earth. So I would say the summation explanation of who the rock is it is Jesus' kingdom here on earth that God has blessed, that will never be ended. It will come after great empires that we consider great, but it will be greater than all of them, and it will cover all the earth. It will cover all the people of the earth. That is really what the symbology of that rock is. But that also leads us into the first two questions, which I'm putting at the end, which are the last two questions, which is, why didn't we get a chance to go into depth in the dream? The real answer is because I didn't. And that's a horrible answer. But when we read through Daniel, we see two main aspects of the people in Daniel. Or I'm sorry, there's two main aspects in the book of Daniel. One is the people and how they act, and two is the image of the end times, the image of how God is going to finish everything. When we're going through Daniel on Wednesday nights, what I've been seeing in Daniel, what I've really been felt that our society, our culture needs, is to understand that even though Daniel had his eye on the prize and the eye then on the end times, the fact that God will come back and everything will be accomplished, he does so and he honors that knowledge with practical applications of how to communicate effectively to other people through discretion, discernment, respect. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get obtuse. He doesn't get violent. That, for me, is the big reason why we're looking at Daniel right now. We're not looking at Daniel as an end-time book at the moment. It is, and there is some great prophecy in here that we want to cover. But for the moment, we're going to go for the rest of December and see how Daniel treated the authority that had been put above him. How Daniel, through respect, through honor of God, even though these governments were corrupt, he still submitted to them when right to do so, and he rebelled against them when right to do so. And I think we can learn a lot from that. The dream that he dreams about is a statue. And it's a statue's head is of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet and toes partly of clay, partly of iron. When we read about the dream, we see that there is a clear designation of what these represent. Daniel says, first of all, the gold is your kingdom, is the Babylonian kingdom. The silver, the arms of silver and the chest of silver is going to be what's coming next, which would have been, in historical record, the Persian Empire. The Persian came in and conquered Babylon, ruled the area of Babylon for about 200 years, from about 530 BC to about 331 BC, when Alexander the Great came and took over it. And so then we move to the Belly of Bronze, and the Belly of Bronze is what a lot of people call the Greek Empire. It's really the Macedonian Empire. Alexander the Great was a Macedonian, not a Greek. But he conquered the Persian Empire, and then his kingdom was split into what's called the Diadochi, which is a kingdom of four. You had Ptolemy that settled in the southwest in Egypt. You had Seleucus that settled in the Persian area. His empire split apart. It did not last. Out of the remnants of the knowledge that you can expand, the Roman Empire, or Roman Republic, became the Roman Empire. It conquered the entire Mediterranean basin, most of the habitable area of the Near East and the Arabian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula it conquered all of France, it conquered most of southern England. But that's the dream that he has. And he goes on to talk about a forthcoming kingdom of 10 toes of clay and iron. But the reason why we're not focusing on that is we need to have our eye on the end that God is coming back. But we also need to practically love the people around us. The people that are here, the people that are trying and struggling but have chosen not to know God, they still need help. They need to see us as Christians doing what is right regardless of what is told that we need to, regardless of what we are told and what we need to be. There are a lot of things coming in culture to us and our children that are saying, you need to think like this because you have to be loving. Daniel knows and shows us when it's proper to submit and when it's proper to rebel, and how to go about doing it, how to maintain a positive attitude, how to maintain a respectful attitude. That's part of the reason why we didn't go in depth into the dream. Little explanation now, but that is why I focused on how Daniel deals with Nebuchadnezzar and how Daniel deals with the knowledge. Daniel does things to glorify God. And if we are glorifying God, since we already know what the end is going to be, we should keep doing that. So that was just a choice. That's why we didn't go over it. And if you do want to learn more in depth, we can absolutely go through that again sometime. But for the moment, we're looking at how Daniel addresses authority, not the end times of the world. Now that being said, I did get a question about what, as an opinion, what do you think the 10 toes are? And I wanted to dive into this just for 5 or 10 minutes here now because, like I said, Wednesday night is about how Daniel is dealing with authority, sometimes good authority, sometimes bad authority, but authority nonetheless. So we'll cover a couple of these Daniel questions now. So what we're looking at is in, let's see here. And it says, its legs were of, so this is in verse 33. It's talking about the statue. Its legs are iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. And as you watched, a rock was hewn out from the mountain, not by human hands, and it struck the feet of iron and clay, smashing them to bits. And the whole statue was crushed. And then he goes on to give an interpretation. It says that you, King Nebuchadnezzar, are going to be the head of gold. After your kingdom, to the end of another inferior to yours will rise and take your place. After that kingdom, a third kingdom represented by bronze, which will rule the world. Following that kingdom, there will be a fourth one, as strong as iron. Now we're into the Roman era. The kingdom will smash and crush previous empires, just as iron smashes and crushes everything in it. The feet and the toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that this kingdom will be divided like iron mixed with clay, and it will have some of the strength of iron. But will some of the parts be as strong as iron and other parts be as weak as clay? So, the question asks an opinion. The feet, the toes of clay. Specifically, it says, what do you make of the toes of clay and iron? So this is a personal opinion after reading Daniel. Is the three empires after Babylonian, after the Chaldeans, the Persians, the Macedonians, the Romans. After that, we see these 10 toes that have some of the strength of the Roman Empire and some of the not. So something I wanted to just kind of throw out, because this is how I believe the 10 toes to be. This is a personal opinion. This is not some sort of divine revelation. This is not some sort of I know everything. This is what I think those 10 toes represent. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the consolidated singular Roman Empire, out of that that geographical area from the Arabian Desert to London, England, as we look through history, there's risen 9 empires. And I just wanted to run through that real fast. So this is just what I think it means. I think it means the sequential empires we've seen through time that are founded in Roman/European descent. And when I say Roman, I specifically mean the influence Rome exerted on the surrounding area. As far as Moscow, if we ever see Roman or Russian history, you'll see they're known as Tsars, which is Russian for Caesar. So this is what I think the 10 toes are. So if you look up here, after the Roman Empire fell, I think there's 9 empires that came up. The first one we had was the Byzantine Empire. They picked up the pieces of the Roman Empire. Then we have the first non-Christian based empire, which was the Umayyad Caliphate out of the province of Roman Arabia. They grew and they conquered a lot of land. The second non-Christian based empire was the Ottoman Empire. And a lot of people forget that the Ottoman Empire was based in Roman Anatolia, Roman Turkey. Think Ephesus, Galatia, Colossae, that area. That's where the Turks came from. Again, they sprung up from a Roman Empire. So that's 3 empires right there. Then you start getting into the history of the European empires. So the next one that pops up is the Russian Empire. Again, they adopted the name Tsar. They conquered a lot of land spanning 3 continents, spanning Europe, Asia, and North America. While they were conquering things, the French took over large swaths of Middle America, what we consider United States, Middle and North America, and a lot of West Africa. In fact, if you go to West Africa right now, most of the time you'll be speaking French. While the French Empire was going, or just before them rather, the Spanish Empire conquered most of the islands between Africa and America, like the Canary Islands, places like that. Then there was also, they conquered most of Western South America because the Treaty of Tordesillas said, the Pope said, on this demarcation on the west, Spain gets it, on the east, Portugal gets it. And they also had large swaths of southwestern America. The Spanish Empire was actually in conflict with the Portuguese Empire, which was seen here. That's why they divided up South America. But the Portuguese became a real big island base. They had a lot of coastal areas. They conquered and had a port in Macau, China. They were the first ones to round the southern tip of Africa and open up the spice trade, so that gave them a lot of wealth. In addition to the Portuguese Empire, you also had the British Empire, which we all know from history class, huge empire spanning almost, one, two, four, 5 continents? Yeah, 6, no, 5. No, 6. 2, 3, no, 5. Because they have one colony in South America, Belize was a British colony. But they had a lot of land. Now again, the British came out of, not the Roman Empire, but that was their foundation. For the longest time, they used Roman law. They used Roman fortifications. They just embellished and built on top of them. And then by proxy, if you look at the British Empire, you have to consider America's influence in the here and now, not imperialistic, but we have a far-reaching effect on the world. If we look at this map right here, all those dark blue spots you see are stations of thousands and thousands of troops with thousands of pieces of machinery. The light blue a little less. All the orange ones you see in there are places where we have military access to bases and everything. So we have a worldwide reach. Would I call us an empire in the traditional sense of imperial Europe? No. But back to the question, what do I personally think the 10 toes represent? I personally think the 10 toes represent the empires that grew out of the Roman Empire, and that America would be the 9th empire that has been bequeathed this, and that the 10th one that is coming is going to be what we read about in Revelation, which will be the one world government. It'll be the cashless society. It will be a consorted one nation, one planet program. That is what I think the 10 toes represent. I think the 10 toes represent the empires that came out of the Roman Empire. That we had the Byzantines, we had the Umayyads, we had the Ottomans, we had the Russian, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the British, and then by proxy the Americans. So we're waiting on that 10th empire to come up. Something that will supplant the American empire as a dominant world force. That is what I think the 10 toes are. I could absolutely be wrong. I could absolutely be off the rocker. You guys take a look. Read through Daniel 2. Read through the entire book of Daniel. Then go to Revelation. Read about what's happening in the end times, where we are, and then decide for yourself. But to answer the question, what do you think the 10 toes represent? I, Chris, think the 10 toes represent the sequential empires that came out of the old Roman fall. So that's just me. If you guys need anything else, go ahead and shoot a text to the church, shoot an email to the church. Like I said, this is just a Friday recap, going through some things that we didn't necessarily cover on Wednesday night. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Any questions randomly? Oh, and actually it brings me to one more thing. During the week, we had another question about a Bible translation. And I just wanted to tell you guys, be wary of all the translations that are flooding our bookshelves right now. Specifically, the question that was asked was about the Passion Translation Bible, which is a translation that was penned and translated by a gentleman who claimed to have divine revelation, that God actually breathed on him new insights into the original languages that no one else has. Just be very careful when you see these new translations pop up. Read proven translations. We use the New King James for the most part. I read out from the NAS, the English Standard Version, even the old school King James if you like the fancy language. But just be careful of the new things that are popping up. Always ask for help, read it, get opinions. That way you are better prepared to keep up with everything. And I apologize. If you guys need anything else, let us know. I just wanted to throw it in there because it was a question we got. It was related to the Bible. I wanted to throw it out. Be careful what we read. Hopefully we'll see you guys on Sunday. Stop by. Wally is here. He's going to be preaching, so it'll be a fabulous time. We're still going through Habakkuk, and we would love to absolutely see you guys. So I do hope you have a good one, enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and we will see you Sunday. Bye, guys.